Hi, everybody. Welcome to this latest chat sponsored by Beverage. Today we're talking about the old fashioned, and we'll got some great guests to speak with. My name is Camper English. I'm a journalist based in San Francisco, and I've been covering cocktails and spirits for about 15 or more years now. And also the author of a forthcoming book called Doctors and Distillers, The Remarkable Medicinal History of Beer, Wine, Spirits, and Cocktails. That's coming out this July. So I hope we'll check that out when the time comes. So tonight's talk is sponsored by Beverage. Many of you are on the beverage.co website. Some of you may be watching later on either that website or on YouTube or another streaming network. Beverage, if you go to the website and have a peek around, you will see that they provide several different tasting and learning experiences around booze. And the first of which is an American single malt tasting kit with a range of products to try. And they're also the producers of Whiskey Live in the United States and Canada. The Nashville date has been announced, and I believe tickets are sale for that. That's coming up this summer in July. And they haven't announced the tickets on sale yet, but this fall in September in Toronto, there will be Whiskey Live there. And that's a walk around tasting experience. And the third thing that Beverage does is host these chats to build community and talk around about topics related to the thing most of us like, and that's booze, particularly tonight, the old fashioned. But other talks in the series have been on everything from investing in whiskey to social media and influencers to some other ingredients that go into the old fashioned, including bitters and ice, which have been two panels that I've been on before. So I guess we're completing everything tonight. So we encourage participation. And so you'll see there is a chat on the side. Some of you are already chatting there. And there is a question area as well. If you have questions, it's best to put them in the question section rather than in the chat so that we'll be sure to see them. And we may take those during the talk. We may wait till the end. We'll see how that goes. We'll play it by ear. We're all very casual here. So tonight, we'll bring on our panelists, and we'll start with Charles Hardwick, who is coming on shortly. Hello, Charles.
Hello. How are you, Camper?
I'm doing great. Actually, it's nice and early for me here, a little later for you in New York.
Yes, it is. Yeah. But, you know, city never sleeps, so wide awake.
I go to bed super early. I don't belong there, so I'm West Coast. So to get started, can you give us an introduction to who you are and what you do and maybe a bit of your background? Because I don't want to say like old is the theme tonight. It's just the old fashioned. We are young at heart, if in no other way. So please let us know who you are.
Sure. Yeah. Well, my name is Charles Hardwick. I am a bartender and a bar consultant and have been for just shy of about 31 years. I live and work in New York City and have essentially my entire career. I've done stints in other parts of the world and of the country, but you know, those mostly consisted of events. I've worked at some really pretty well recognized bars over the years. Some of them you may know, you know, depends on whether or not you're based in New York or not, or if you've ever even been here. But some of them include places like the Odeon, which is a kind of a classic, originally founded by Keith McNally, still open, run by his former wife. I worked at Pravda, alongside the guys who started Employees Only, Jay and Deshaun, and a lot of the founders of Employees Only. Most recently, I've worked at a place called The Office, which is a co-brand of the Aviary out of Chicago. And that was located here in the city in Columbus Circle in the Mandarin Oriental Hotel, which is a 5-star hotel out of Asia. I've worked with numerous brands over the years, most recently being a category ambassador for the category of Geneva, which is a Dutch style of gin, very malty style. Some might say the original gin. And that brings me to your screens today, and talking about the old fashioned with Camper.
Right. And one non-brown liquor that makes a heck of a good old fashioned is
it really does. Yeah, especially the ones that are 100% malt, that can drink very much like a whiskey. Yeah. We might get into that a little later. Who knows?
We might. I think we'll talk about some variations going forward.
Yeah.
Also, can you describe a little bit of the program at the office at the Aviary? And first of all, can you, for folks who don't know,
sure.
what's the Aviary as well as the office, because they're very different bars. I've had the pleasure of visiting both of them in Chicago and in New York.
Oh, okay. Yeah. They're very different. Sadly, the New York outposts are no longer open. It's a combination of pandemic factors and other things. But I was there. I went to the office at the Aviary. That's kind of the way I tend to refer to it, because the Aviary is kind of the more well-known of the two properties. I started there shortly after it opened in June of 2017, and then I started there in August of 2017. The Aviary is this kind of very forward-looking, almost futuristic, sort of guest participation styled cocktail bar. The cocktails there are really almost treated like food. I don't want to, but I will, because I think it'll help people understand. It sort of is born out of a little bit out of the molecular gastronomy movement, and taking that approach to cocktails where, everything isn't fully finished until you bring it to the table and something happens at the table that is like, almost magical, or something is revealed in some way, or the guest has to do something to bring the cocktail to life even more. So that's kind of what the Aviary is. You have things like rotovaps and liquid nitrogen and things like that. The office, because there's always people, especially in a 5-star hotel, who always stay at the Mandarin Oriental, or in the case of Chicago, there's just people, who just want a regular drink, or some version of a regular drink served in a more classic way, where you go and you actually sit down at an actual bar, you talk to the bartender, you tell them what you like, or you just want a gin martini or something like that. So that's kind of, the office is the answer to that question, but taken a bit further, so that you have what we called dusty bottle cocktails, which are like vintage spirits or vintage cocktails that can go all the way back really to the 1920s. But all the preparation and the serves are very classic in nature. So that's kind of how the two properties and what their kind of respective mission statements are about, is one very modern and the other one very classic.
Great. Thanks for that explanation. I'm not sure if Molly, our third panelist, has joined us, but at any point in the background, Jeff can pop her into the chat when she's there. And in the meantime, we'll continue. So at the office, people were able to, say, buy an old fashioned that was really old.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things. I mean, there's a lot of cool, options there. I mentioned the dusty bottle cocktails. We had these vermouths that were really old, rums, whiskeys, and you could get them in a variety of ways. And there's also a variety of price points. So you didn't necessarily, even though the bar itself is kind of expensive, we're in the sky above Columbus Circle overlooking Central Park. And, you know, you're going to hear me say five-star hotel numerous times, so please bear with me. But so, you know, given all those things, it's not going to be dirt cheap, but it's going to be reasonable and you'll still have a special experience. So, for example, you know, you could get, say, a rum from the 70s. We had a Captain Morgan, which is actually quite good, for like, you know, $25. Now you're talking about an ounce serve. We also had these really cool mini. You would love these, Camera. We had these mini bottles, like the kinds you would get like on airplanes and stuff like that. And so you could do an experience from that and go. And we had like a cool little kind of a hidden case or camouflage case that you could open up, and there was like this magnetic lock, and the people would pick 3 bottles, and then you'd make kind of a dealer's choice cocktail from the minis.
Oh, that's cool.
So it was kind of a variety of ways that people could experience without breaking the bank. But yes, to your original, the point of your original question, we could make some old fashions and other things with very old spirits. How old? Like I said, up to, you know, the early part of the 20th century. And the cool thing about that too is you get to see, you know, if you're a whiskey nerd, you get to see how spirits change. You get to sometimes have a conversation, especially whiskey and American spirits. You get to have a conversation about what the war effort did to whiskeys and then and cocktails, and then what you know, sort of post-war era, what took place then, you know, and that kind of turned towards vodka and things, and then gin starts to come back, and then the production methods start to come back for American whiskey, and then we start seeing like really pretty good whiskeys again. So you know, but I can't think of a better way to showcase some of those whiskeys from any of those eras than an old fashioned. And we did have. Probably get into this a little bit later because I see it looks like Molly is at least somewhat on deck. We could make some really killer old fashions with like old Granddad, old Fitzgerald, you know, things like that. And for me, it was great because I got to taste a lot of those things, you know.
Yeah.
Just to make sure, just quality control.
Of course, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would imagine that a lot of the audience, there's probably some overlap between the whiskey collectors in the world, and of which there are now a lot more than there used to be.
yes.
And even finding supposedly regular whiskey on the shelves has become something of a process for a lot of people. And all these Facebook groups just like, hey, the Costco has 12 bottles of Blue Spot or whatever, and
Yeah.
people run to get the whiskey. But I would imagine that tasting the vintage stuff is its own experience. I do remember a time talking with Salvatore Calabrese, who's a very famous, world famous London bartender.
The maestro.
The maestro.
Cocktail maestro, yeah.
Who is known particularly for vintage cognac. And he was saying how he does a presentation when someone would order a very old special cognac, that be like, okay, when this was made, you know, cars were new, and the country was at war, and this was distilled by the women in the household, or you know, just these very romantic stories about what was happening when the whiskey or cognac or whatever was made. And it seems like such a special experience to be able to have access to, and also it's so romantic. To
it really is, and he can really bring that stuff to life, you know. And it doesn't hurt to have an Italian accent and be dressed to the nines while you're telling this stuff too.
It's true, which is not me.
And we love
I'm dressed to the fours.
Yeah, well said.
So I think it's about time that we should introduce what an old fashioned is, and what goes in that, and maybe a little bit about its history. So I guess I'll give it a start, and feel free to interrupt at any time. But the old fashioned is actually the adjective for an old fashioned cocktail. It's like going into a store and ordering a tall instead of a tall coffee or whatever. But it became the name that we use today for this specific drink. Now, a cocktail evolved out of other drinks historically. There were juleps and slings and punches and fixes and fizzes and things like that. And when a cocktail came into the equation, that was defined as a bittered sling. So we had one very simple cocktail format and they added bitters to it. And now it's a new drink called a cocktail. It wasn't the term at the time for any mixed drink, as a lot of people use it today, but something specific. There was even consumed at a specific time of the day, which is the morning. So the cocktail, and it took me 10 years plus to actually believe this, but it's true. Cocktail was a morning drink that people would get up in 1806 and go to the bar first thing and have one of the booziest drinks available first thing in the morning.
Wow,
But
you're teaching me something here. I never heard this version of this
oh
drink
yeah, for
before. Okay.
sure. And the reason it was a breakfast drink was because of the bitters, which were supposed to be stomach soothing medicine. And what I've come to learn in doing additional historic research is that there are versions of morning drinks that have bitter botanicals in them in multiple different cultures throughout the world. So we have to consider what the sanitation levels of the water supply were in the
Yeah.
early 1800s, particularly in cities where people were reporting on these drinks, in London overseas, as well as in the United States. So these writers from abroad would come to the America and they were like, people there wake up and go to the bar. And they were as amazed by it as I
Yeah.
think we would be. So the cocktail was it was a stimulating beverage was in its first definition of it, but a beverage with spirit, so usually whiskey, but it can be made with anything, sugar, water, which is from the time before ice, and bitters, the final ingredient that made a cocktail a cocktail. So that was different from a sling, which didn't have the bitters in it. And then we had a cocktail. So everyone loved cocktails, and people started adding all sorts of stuff to it, as bartenders tend to do. I blame you. And
Challenge accepted.
things like maraschino liqueur or absinthe or curacao. Hi, Molly.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm sorry. How are you guys?
How are
Doing
you?
pretty good. We were just
Sorry
getting.
to be late.
That's okay.
You're right on time. You're right.
We've been filled us right. Always right on time.
I've been drinking, so no, I'm kidding.
Well, that's
Well,
you're
join the
alone
party.
in that.
Well, here. Let me
Get
go.
back to work.
I know. I got a flask. Here we go.
Well, we're kidding. We're just doing it, Dean Martin. This is all just iced tea. Yeah,
Yes,
we're
it
just a little.
is.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Arizona iced
Even
tea on the rocks.
Charles.
Thanks. So we're just finishing sort of describing what the history of the old fashioned. As I saw in your talk I watched earlier today, Molly, a TEDx talk you did, that you're well aware of the old fashioned's history as a morning drink, the cocktail's
Yes.
history as a morning drink. So we were just talking about how the drink was getting fancier and fancier, and more garnishes were being added, and all of these other ingredients. And then it's not new that there are curmudgeonly drinkers in the world who want their drinks a very specific, special way. That goes back to the naming of the old fashioned. When people say, I don't want any of that junk in my drink, I just want an old fashioned cocktail, like the way they used to be made.
Made the old-fashioned way.
Old fashioned way by an old fashioned bartender. And so that's how the drink we know today as the old fashioned evolved. And then, of course, from there it devolved and then evolved and then devolved again and again. The cocktail itself was first defined in the first years of the 1800s. I believe the old fashioned is towards the end of that century, where the old fashioned started to be called the old fashioned.
Yeah, that's my understanding too.
Same.
So Molly, can you let us know a little bit about yourself? I didn't introduce you before you were here, so I'm going to let you razzle dazzle us with with your brilliance and a little history of your career as well as your current business.
Yes. So my name is Molly Wellman, of course, and I'm here in beautiful Cincinnati, Ohio, which I know, Camper, you've visited here before. And Charles, have you ever been to Cincinnati?
Sadly, I have not. I have an old friend who's from that area, but I have never visited there.
You're going to have to come and visit. You're going to be very nicely surprised how cool of a city we are. It's a really neat city. But I'm born and raised here. I have a bar called Japs, Japps. It used to be an old wig and hair store named after a German man named John G. Japp, and that's where the name comes from. It was in business as a wig and hair store from 1879 all the way to 1985. And then in the 1990s, it turned into a bar, and I've had it since 2010. So 12 years. It'll be 12 years in June 23rd, of this cocktail bar. It was the first cocktail bar here in Cincinnati. And we make cocktails from the 1700s all the way to the 1950s. And so when you get a cocktail, you get a story to go with it. So that's
cool.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. But nobody's thrown anything back at me yet, so I think I'm doing okay.
Brilliant. So I have a question. Is Cincinnati still a thing?
Cincinnati? Yeah. People still call it Cincinnati. Yeah.
Okay. Is that generational? Is that like, yeah?
I think so. We are a big time German centric town. A lot of Germans moved here and Irish, and with their accents and everything, it would have been Cincinnati a lot. And we say instead of like asking somebody to repeat themselves and saying, "What did you say?" we say, "Please," and that's another very German thing. So it was really weird. When I lived in San Francisco, I'd be like, "Please," and people like, "Please what?"
Yeah. In German you say bitte. Yeah, when you don't hear somebody, you can't make out what they say and stuff. And but I also wonder if it's like the Italians, like, or people of Latin say when you get angry, do you say Cincinnati by accident? You get passionate about something.
Sometimes when you're like talking really fast, but
it could turn into Cincinnati. Okay.
And so Molly, you're the owner of Japs.
I am.
Before that, you did you bartend when you lived in San Francisco before moving back to Cincinnati?
I did a little bit, but mostly I was a cocktail waitress at nightclubs and stuff like that. But I didn't get into classic and craft cocktails until I moved back to Cincinnati. And then I taught myself myself all those different drinks and the history behind it. I love history, so it was really easy. As you know, both of you know, if you study spirits and cocktails, you learn about the history of the world. So I think it's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And speaking of cocktail history, I wanted to ask for everyone to share their personal history with the old fashioned. I guess I'll take the first slot. I can't recall having one in a bar before I made one for myself based on a recipe for a book. It doesn't mean it happened that way, but that's how I'm going to remember it for the next hour. And then I saw the recipe and I said, okay, well, I've got to go out and buy sugar cubes and I've got to go out and buy some soda water to make this drink. I already have whiskey at home. And so I followed the instructions in the book, which I think, was not a book from the current decade, but a little older. And I put my sugar cube in the bottom of the glass and the bitters on that and the splash of soda, which I thought was an ingredient in the drink, but turns out it just makes it wet. And muddled it. I don't know if I bought a muddler at this point. It may have been pre, the mojito era where brands would give muddlers, like if you walk through a door. But they muddled my sugar cube up and added my ice and whiskey and had the drink and immediately had, sugar crust all in my teeth and it didn't stop me. I enjoyed the drink, but it was definitely following instructions, I think, from another era that may have tripped me up a little bit. And now I don't make my old fashions like that. And maybe we'll share after this how we like to make them ourselves.
Yeah. That sounds very much like the way at much later on. but that sounds like the real like kind of milk and honey way that Sasha used to teach it. Was kind of exactly like that, which it has a certain kind of benefits and things like that in one way, and it is very classic. But turns out, sugar cube doesn't dissolve that great with, cold or even room temperature club soda.
Yep, turns
So
out.
you got like a little sediment at the bottom of your old fashioned.
I do, and it's for me it lacks the same charm that a caipirinha has. Caipirinha has with the brown sugar at the bottom of your glass. It's it's about being rustic on the beach.
Yeah, the old peasant drink.
Yeah.
So Charles, do you remember your first or a formative old fashioned experience?
Yeah, very well actually. I've told this story on occasion. I actually have 2 volumes to the story, if I may, but I'll try and be economical about it. So the first one is like how I initially learned how to make it, and it was at this place in Soho, which called Match, where I was the bar manager. This is 1998, so really no one of under 60 years old at the time was drinking old fashions, and I'm working the day shift one day, and this kid comes in, like he's legal, but he's like definitely in his early 20s, and he orders an old fashioned, and he says, "Do you know how to make an old fashioned?" And me being New York City bartender for at that point about 6 years, to be honest, but I hadn't really made very. So I was like, yeah. And he was like, "Okay, let me show you, let me show you how to do it." And I kind of, sort of like got my back up a little bit, like, how's this guy going to show me like how to make an old fashioned, So, but I went with it, and he's like, you have an orange slice? I was like, yeah. That already shows you how long ago it was when he asked me, do I have an orange slice? He's like, you got your cherry, you got this. He's like, okay. So he made sure that I had all his stuff, and I had a sugar cube. And he said, before we start, I just want to tell you, the person who orders this drink is very particular about it, and the way. If you make it this way that I'm showing you, they like it this way. They like that you're showing that care to make it this way. He's like, I guarantee you they'll have one of those, and they'll always leave you like $5 as a tip. So I was like, okay, that kind of got even more of my attention. So he's like, put the sugar cube in there. You get the bitters on top of the cube. He's like, you can either take the peel, you got the half wheel. You can either take the sort of pith and the peel off of there and just muddle the kind of supreme of the orange in there along with the cherry, and then add you could leave it on. And some people like that too, But basically, he showed me like that very old style way where you muddle everything in there, and you got like the fruit salad kind of version, right? And then you add the ice, whiskey, stir it down, and you give it to him. And then he was talking about, which is kind of true, but he was talking about how the drink sort of will change over time, if all that stuff is in it, and the person can kind of incorporate all that stuff into the drink as they're drinking it. And the first few times that I made the old fashioned that way, again, this is 1998 through however long, I kid you not, like every person that what he said was true. Like every person that ordered it from me would leave me like $5 or $4, definitely more than $1. And I was like, wow, that kid was really right. And the other story is, it involves Naren Young coming to visit me at my then bar here in the city, this bar called Blue Owl. And I was telling him, for some reason, I reverted back to doing it that way a little bit. I wasn't fully doing it like, say, the Orgy Saunders way, which is kind of the real popular way now. And I just happened to say to him kind of late at night, he was there with another woman who ran some of Julie Reiner's bars. I was like, I've been doing it this way, with the muddle. And he was like, do me a favor, make me one. So I was like, oh, okay. So I was making one. I did the muddling, and I straw tasted it to, see if it, tasted okay. And so he takes the drink, and like I know Naren really well now and then, so it's not like So he takes it and he tastes it and he goes, "Why would you do that? Why would you do that?" I wanted to crawl under the bar And it was so honest the way he did it. Like I was like, I will never make the old fashioned that way again. And I was like, well, what do you think? He's like, no, he's like, man, just make it. He's like, it's also easier. Just make it with the sugar and the bitters and the orange peel. He's like, boom,
Yeah.
you're done. I was like, okay.
You survived though.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So how about you?
So I've always made it with the sugar cube, the orange peel, and the whiskey and the bitters. I mean, at Japs, it's our #1 selling drink. We make old fashions like every other drink. It feels like that. And I know this is a side thing, but for some reason, the espresso martini has come back.
Yeah, I've heard that's blowing up again. Yeah.
But I was like, we've had groups of people coming in asking for them. And then if we didn't have one, oh, sorry, my cat, they would turn around and walk out. I'm like, are you serious? It's like 2003. What the hell's going on here?
Yeah, that's messed up.
Anyway, so the old fashioned, I cannot remember the first time I made an old fashioned. I think it was, oh gosh, it was way before Japs. It was probably at the first job I had here in Cincinnati. And probably like, I don't remember making any at the nightclub. It wasn't really a nightclub kind of drink.
No.
So in Cincinnati, but I've always used a sugar cube. I've always used orange peel and then Angostura bitters. And then my favorite whiskey to use for an old fashioned is Old Grandad Bonded.
I love that.
It's high enough proof, and it's it's dry enough, and it has enough complexity that when you mix the sugar in enough, it's like having little sparks of sweetness instead of just a flat sweetness that you get from like a simple syrup. So that's the way I make a classic old fashioned. And then at Jabs we make all different kinds of old fashions. Like I have a old fashioned for all 4 seasons. And some of them use simple syrup, some of them use some syrup, just a sweetening agent. So or sweetening a sweet part, and then but for 2 of them I use sugar. One is a bourbon vanilla sugar though. So
it sounds delicious.
Tobacco bitters. It's really good.
Yeah. I've discovered recently, I started calling it's settled down a little bit, but I started calling that, meaning the old fashioned or it, kind of the male cosmopolitan, it became like this landing spot where for all these guys, no disrespect to them, like people, the stages of development when you're going out to drink, and within someone's life, as they, come of age. But, it was like these men would love an old fashioned, I mean, they especially after, what was the movie with Ryan Gosling and Steve Carell? Crazy Stupid Love. Yes.
Like
So especially after that, and like I think I found out when I saw that movie, I was like, okay, I put it on Facebook. Facebook was more crowdsourcing. I was like, okay, who consulted on this that we know? Because he made it so perfectly, and they had close-ups of him making it. I think it was like Eric Alperin or something. It was him, right? Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. So after that, especially, and then you had all these guys like, they like the whole, and the sound. So that was a great landing spot. And it's leveled off a little bit now, but I had guys ordering old fashions all the time.
Yep. I think a lot of people, I feel safety in the drink that they know, and they don't have to look at the menu and be maybe confronted with ingredients they're not familiar with. And it's funny that a drink that's quite boozy and extremely old is like the sort of hip safety drink for a generation of people.
Yeah. What's old is new again, for sure. Yeah.
Keeps coming back. Now, speaking of old-fashioned variations, Molly, you're closer to Wisconsin than either of us, and they make a different sort of old-fashioned there. And I'm wondering how often you might see it in Cincinnati, or can you just tell us what that? And do people ask for it in a specific way?
So I actually do have quite a few people who really like brandy. They like brandy old fashions. They also like mezcal old fashions. I'm seeing a lot of that come, and rum old fashions as well, which is pretty cool. But up in Wisconsin, they drink their old fashions the original way with brandy, American brandy, and I find it to be really good. I make some. It's not as popular as whiskey because in this area, bourbon is king. You know, we're right up the street from all the best bourbon distilleries in the entire world. So bourbon is king here. But I do have quite a few people from up north come down, and they'll ask for, if they're wanting to have something, a taste of home, they'll ask for a brandy old fashioned. But I have a lot more people getting into brandy cocktails and whatnot, so they will drink a brandy old fashioned, which is kind of cool, I think.
And does the Wisconsin version, does that, I heard, and this could be wrong, that instead of that splash of soda that I first read about in books, that they use Sprite?
I've heard that too. I do not use Sprite. I don't use soda water
Oh
either.
my God.
If I'm gonna moisten a sugar cube, it's going to be with Spirit, 100%. I'm not gonna waste any room in that cocktail, you guys.
And that's why Jeff says a great place to drink. So if someone just came into either one of your bars and without specifying further asked for an old fashioned, what would go into it? Clearly there's going to be ice and there's going to be some kind of whiskey, but do you default to bourbon or rye? Or what do you prefer?
Well, like I said, I like the old Granddad Bonded one. It's 100 proof. It holds up to ice. We do.
Uh-oh.
Buffering.
We're buffering.
Like to control the water. Can you hear me again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, thank God. I don't like, we have big ice cubes. I work with a company here for big ice cubes, but I'm not a big fan of big ice cubes. I really don't like them, but I like the company, so I work with them. And there are some people who call for the big ice cubes, but I prefer little ice cubes because I like to control the water in old fashioned.
Do you build in the glass, or do you build?
I build it in the glass. Yeah, it's sugar cube. I mean, it's like I can make it in my sleep. Sugar cube, 2 to 3 dashes of bitters, Angostura bitters, orange peel. Muddle that all together. 2 ounces of old Granddad Bonded, and then I stir it to get everything combined, and then put ice in and stir it again so that everything is combined when I serve it straight to the customer. So I don't have that little, dredge on the bottom of the glass. It's all
sure. Yeah, you don't have the like that sediment. Yeah, and that kind of like looks like there's dirt in the glass or something.
Yeah,
like that. Yeah. I myself, I mean, I do, especially in a place like the office or something like that. I do ask people, usually bourbon or rye, but it sort of brings to mind one time where this guy was kind of, I mean, I didn't really necessarily take offense. I thought it was a little silly, but I also took it like I should have asked him. I just kind of, I think I just immediately went to Maker's Mark or something like that, which honestly, I like Maker's Mark. It's fine, but it wouldn't necessarily match up. It was very convenient. And I also know, sometimes you do this for a long time and you read people a certain way and or you feel like, so the guy, he drinks half of the old fashioned and he's like, you didn't ask me what kind of bourbon, I want in there. So I was like, okay, I'll make you another one. But usually some bourbon, often a wheated bourbon or a bourbon that has some kind of flavor grain in it. I do love the idea though of your old Granddad for 2 reasons. A, I love old Granddad Bonded, and be that higher proof standing up to like the other elements really well.
Yeah.
But yeah, usually I'll ask people, but if people say you pick or what do you think is best, I'll usually go with a bourbon, or I'll also try to explain to them the difference.
And one time I was writing a story and I didn't realize that there was some sort of consensus on this, but that people choose bourbon for their old fashioned, but for the Manhattan, more people reach for rye.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, so that's, I think, a super interesting thing that maybe a lot of people haven't heard about. And another thing that I think is a great story for people who don't work in the industry is what happened with oranges and the old-fashioned trend. So old fashions became so popular, and in the standard preparation, the fruit isn't used, just the peel for the old fashioned. And bars ended up having a lot of peeled oranges sitting around and had to find some use for them. Have you confronted this or made any changes?
So at Japs, I try to use the whole. We save the oranges. I either will make I make my own triple sec at Japs. So
Oh, nice.
I try to incorporate that and use it in like an oleo saccharum kind of a deal. And I'll take those oranges and squeeze the juice out. We use the juice, and then I'll take the rest of the orange along with orange peels, of course, and then I will make it into the triple sec using that oleo sac whiskey oleo process to make a really good triple sec. So
That's delicious.
We try to use the oranges as much. I go through so much triple sec with classic cocktails. That's what I use for a simple syrup. It just adds a little bit of depth in other cocktails. That's the main thing. I mean, I make like a dozen bottles a week and we go through them every week. So yeah, we use the oranges.
Yeah, I myself, I've worked in a lot of different or a lot of kind of like really culinary programs where there's like a lot of chef elements, there's a lot of kitchen elements, very elevated ones. So, the idea in the ideally speaking, you have your peeled fruit that goes here and it gets labeled, and you got your Sharpie, and then that way nothing really gets wasted. That's the way it's supposed to work. But occasionally, I had these places over the years where somebody's just not on top of the systems. They don't care, and I'm like, what do I do with this? And they're like, oh, just throw it away. And I'm like, what?
I've had many of
we are throwing, we use orange juice here, right? All you gotta do is cut them in, put them aside and have a certain, this is not that, it was just horrific, that someone would even think that way. And I'm not saying it in a way to grandstand or signal or anything like that. To me, it just was so nonsensical. But yeah, ideally speaking, that's in the sort of best, most well organized places. But you took it to the next level with the whole triple sec thing. We did make oleo saccharum at this place that I worked at called Bethany, which was open for a little over 3 years. That was very well reviewed and so on. But that still left us with, because we would only use the peel for that. When we put kind of vacuum seal on, we still wound up with, the oranges.
Yeah.
So, and, you have to kind of really have this kind of rotating system in place where, there's a clipboard, and that's to make sure that stuff doesn't either get thrown away or go bad or both.
Exactly. We every week we just have a Cambro in the refrigerator that we just fill up the used fruit with. Because I use the used limes. We don't do a lot of lime peels, but if I have limes left over, make a cordial. And then with the lemons, I make a lemon oleo saccharum with that.
Yeah, it's delicious.
Yeah, I love doing it. I think it's really great, and it just brings it so fresh. So
yeah.
I like going into bars and looking for the orange juice. It's sort of my silly little nerd game. That I'm like, okay, so where do they use up the orange juice, and find it in the drinks on the menu. And a lot of people do happy hour specials the next day that with drinks that include orange juice, like the blood and sand cocktail, all of a sudden came back at the same time.
Yeah, which is a hard drink to really make taste good. That reminds me of something too, is that of just my own personal thing. I like orange juice a lot, but I don't really like orange juice in cocktails.
Neither.
For me overall, I sometimes, especially going back to the old days, we used to put a little splash of orange juice in the margarita if it was fresh OJ, especially. But generally speaking, like maybe a sidecar or a between sheets or something like that, like a splash of it. But we did a big thing at the office was dealer's choice, and we only would have like a 375 or orange juice there. Every now and then somebody come in and want orange juice,
Yeah.
or a screwdriver. But I never, for dealer's choice, unless they said orange or something, Valencia or something, I just was like, and I was like, why is that? Orange juice tastes good. But just to me, I don't know, I just never thought of it as something that really served cocktails particularly well as the main juice, as the like primary juice. Complementary in a little bit, like a dash of it or two, sure, but overall not so much.
I have you heard of the drink called a maiden's prayer?
No.
Maiden's prayer it's a really easy drink. It's gin, lemon, triple sec, and then orange juice. And I've gotten quite a few people hooked on there. Now, of course, there's like all cocktails, many different recipes for the maiden's prayer, but the one I like that very simple one. And so I get a lot of people to drink that. It's funny at Jeff's, I don't take orders from customers. I just tell them what they're going to drink and I make it and they drink it.
That's what you did to me actually when I came into Jeff's.
I remember.
You're going to have that one.
Yeah. Like, I'm making you the midnight. I made you the midnight.
Well, and to your point a little bit too, at the office, those cocktails are not cheap. The dealer's choice cocktails are $28. Like,
wow.
So like it includes tip and everything, but it's like just not cheap, right? So, but then
how expensive New York and San Francisco.
Yeah, that's far from the norm, but it is close to the norm in that area for that kind of property. People never batted an eye, but then you got the can of worms that can get open where you tell them that we do dealer's choice, and you offer up all these options or the possibility of them, and they could be thematic, which I always used to like. Well, I want this. I get an order from the table and say Wizard of Oz. And I'd be like, really? Wizard of Oz? Like, okay, I'm going to make it green. Where's the Midori? Emerald City. Done. That kind of a deal. But, you have people who, they get excited and you start, and I've done it in a few different places, like where we have dealerships. But the office was really, we only had, it would vary, but maybe 6 drinks on the menu.
Wow.
So people start like telling you things. And when they got to the third thing, I would always, in a nice way, usually, like cut them off. Like, okay, got it. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Because, they start saying things that conflict with one another.
Right.
And the best way to enjoy being at the bar in the dealer's choice is to actually be drinking the drink, not like telling me about it or me trying to figure out what you mean or me asking you a lot of questions, to try to get to what you mean. It's like, I got it. Like, I know how to make it taste good. Just make it taste good. And like, don't, have them wait 20 minutes for the doggone drink while I'm looking at 60 tinctures, trying to figure out how to get that just perfect, whatever, So yeah, that I feel you on what you're saying too about kind of stepping in as a professional and on their behalf, not out of arrogance, but on their behalf to like ensure that you kind of cut to the chase.
Yeah. I usually go in with about 3 to 4 different cocktails for each spirit, all classic. And like I'll study them and I'll study the history they have. Yeah. And
Riffs on a classic,
Yeah, I love the classics. Those are my favorite. I have a couple craft that I throw in there, but for the most part, it's classic because it's easier. It's a busy bar, so I have to make it 3 to 4 ingredient drinks. And if I have for each thing, then I just say, what spirit do you like? And then I know out of those cocktails in my head, I know exactly. And then I can tell the story.
Yeah, what do you usually like to drink? And they go daiquiri. Yeah, and then you're like, okay, and then you're just like, is there anything you really don't like? I find that too. Let me ask you. So I'll ask you this question, even though Camper is hosting and asking most of the questions, but I like to. I find that people, I feel like this is maybe a bit more of an American thing, but who knows, is people often will say, when you say, what do you like? They'll tell you what they don't like. They'll tell you like 3 things, like, I don't like this, I don't like that, I hate this. I was like, yeah, but actually what you like. But it's fine that people find it harder to define what it is they like from a flavor standpoint, especially in the context of a drink, then they find it to say what they don't like. I don't, not too sweet. You hear that, constantly. We don't make things that are too sweet. It's like saying something is too salty. That's not.
I always say I'm sweet enough. I don't need to make the drinks too sweet. So,
Yeah.
so I'm like, I don't make sweet drinks. That's why I'm sweet enough. You're sweet enough. You're gonna be okay.
Yeah. And very credible too.
You can use that, Charles.
I'll try. I don't know if it'll be as effective, but I'll report back.
Okay, cool. I want to know everything.
I wanted to, we did have one question from a viewer on
I see that, yeah.
If you have a comment on sugar cube size, because there are many sizes, which I didn't know. I
I was kind of like, my experience is, okay, so sorry, did you want to go for first? Because it's just something's popped into my head. I thought I'd blurt it out, but
go for it.
No, go for it, Charles.
So they generally tend to, in my experience, which is considerable, but this person may have a different experience. So I don't want to negate what their experience is in comparison to mine. But in my experience, they do sort of still fall within a relative range of sizes. They may appear larger because of density or something like that. But essentially, if you were to go by, I think, amount, if you were to like break it down with a muddler and try to put it into a teaspoon, it would essentially be about, I believe, about a teaspoon. But what I did want to say that may, in a practical sense, answer that question better is that brown sugar is like a little bit less sweet than white sugar, than refined sugar, I should say. So if I'm using brown sugar, which has a better flavor profile for, I find at least, for old fashions, I will just make sure the straw tastes it. I find that still 1 cube is fine, but I do occasionally hear people say, the old fashioned drinkers say, I don't want it. They feel like it's sweet. I don't feel like it's sweet, but they're worried, or they've had an old fashioned in the past that's too sweet. But what I would say, basically, to sum it up, is just keep in mind that oftentimes the brown sugar cube is going to be slightly less sweet than a white sugar cube. But ultimately, based on density, once you break it down, it should still be about the same amount of sugar.
And then how many dashes of bitters? Molly, you said 2 to 3 earlier. Is that, Charles, are you coming about the same?
It depends if I'm using the Ango bottle, which is like a heavy dash. Then that's probably like 1, or I might dribble a little out.
That might be something that some of our viewers might not know, that a dash of bitters from specifically an Angostura bitters bottle, there's no such thing as a dash of bitters.
Yeah. It's really like, it's almost like if someone was chewing tobacco and they were like, it's like this, it could be this huge dollop. But we never, we, like, coming up, that was all there was. There were no dashers, that were really like, I don't even know what the, some, milligrams or something like that. But yeah, I for me personally, this is a great thing about this stuff. I'm sure you'll agree, Molly, is that, what do you like? How do you think it, you can play around with it? It's a little bit like cooking. If you want to, I call these drinks, there's certain categories of drinks that I call omelet drinks, which are like ways to, they're highly customizable, but you can refine the basics of technique. And they're kind of a skills test. And certainly the old fashioned is one of those drinks. So if you I like more bitters, man, put 2 dashes in there. I wouldn't put more than 2 though. Yeah. But, because then you can't taste the whiskey. But, that's what I would say is like 1, and then, kind of maybe a little bit more if you really want to kind of It's like salt and pepper for your drink, seasoning for your drink.
Yeah.
No, and we
It's
found
like
that in the beginning of a bottle, when it's nearly full, tend to be
Right. And you got a lot more weight behind it, so it's gonna, yeah. And I've done that many times. I'm like, oh,
so true.
you know, you kind of want to like toss it out and start over.
Yeah, I have stained a lot of countertops and clothing with
Oh my God, yeah.
ashes of bitters.
Or you have something where, you know, you're in the weeds a little bit and you do it and you're like, that's fine. And the person's like very nicely like, yeah, can you? And you're like, I should have.
I carry the only thing that works on bitter stains, Tidestick pen. I carry like several of them in my purse.
What is it?
But I always wear
right, the stick pen, yeah.
So like you always get Angostura on you, like when you're bartending. I swear. And so the Tidestick is the only
especially
thing
at your place. It sounds like with all those old fashions. You have a little mini menu there of old fashions.
We make so many. It's so crazy. I can make them in my sleep. In fact, it's so often that when I'm lazy, I'll be like, "Don't you just want an old fashioned?" Because it's just so easy to throw together.
Yeah, old fashioned, right? Old fashioned, old fashioned, old fashioned.
Oh,
yeah.
Boom, boom, boom.
It's like when I'm working out and you know, like Montauk and stuff like that. You know, in the Hamptons, it's like I'm like tequila soda, Casamigos and soda. Yeah, right. Yeah, okay, gotcha. Rosé, cool.
Oh,
how many?
You know,
bottle, got you.
Totally work with you, Charles. I would love to bartend with you.
Well,
you're going to find this hard to believe, but we've actually come to our full hour.
I was like, whoa, what? Can we just go through a wormhole? What happened?
I feel like we just started.
We did. So initially, Charles had mentioned that he saw the different time zones listed for the talk and thought that it was a 3-hour talk until we saw the slash that it was. But I have the feeling that wouldn't be too problematic for us to do, to keep talking for 2 hours more.
Yeah.
Not that we're going to, but
yeah, we get one bathroom break in, you know, we do like, you know, it's like watching Ben-Hur, and we do a little intermission. And then we come back, we play some music, you know, and we keep it moving.
Absolutely.
I love it.
So much fun.
So I guess I'll wrap us up then. So I want to remind the viewers to check out the American single malt kits that are available on the beverage website, as well as to look into Whiskey Live taking place in Nashville in July and Toronto in September, and that there are continued talks scheduled, and you also have access to the previous talks, just like this one, on the website and I believe on the YouTube channel as well. So check those out when you get a chance. And for now, I'd like to say thank you very much to Charles and Molly for joining me here for this talk. It was great and fun and exactly what I figured it would be, knowing you both.
So much fun. Really, truly.
It's so lovely to meet you, Charles, too.
So lovely to meet you. I look forward to meeting you in person sometime very, very, very soon.
Same.